What's up, guys? Welcome back to Showstoppers. In this episode, we speak with Mark Kilens, the VP of Content at Drift, to talk about Drift Insider, their media platform and community, which contains a lot of episodic content, shows, podcasts, and other content that they've created exclusively for that community. So we unpack a little bit about, how this idea came to be about, as well as go deep into a lot of the different series that they have. Really can't wait for you guys to check it out, and I hope you get a lot of value from it. Check it out. What's up, Mark? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, for people who may not know you from before or have seen any of your content, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role at Drift?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure again speaking with you, Kareem. You and I go back during our days at HubSpot. I was there for 8.5 years. I joined Drift about 2 years ago. So at the beginning of 2019, I'm one of the marketing leaders focused on all things content and community building. I get the honor to work with many people across the company on helping grow and expand our revenue acceleration platform and category, and teaching people just how conversational marketing and how conversational sales helps businesses accelerate their revenue. So I'm thrilled to be talking to you today. I know you're a huge believer and are very passionate about content and episodic content specifically, and of course Drift is as well. We create a lot of content. Gail Axelrod, our director of content, is amazing. We have amazing content marketers who are creating just amazing content experiences more than anything today. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, Kareem.
Yeah, 100%. And Mark, I know that, for some people who may not know this from before, you were kind enough to collaborate with me on the book that we've put out called Original Series, where we talked about how brands are starting to really, take a more like sort of like Netflix style approach to creating content, which you're obviously both an advocate and a practitioner of, along with the rest of your team. And I wish like we had like 2-3 hours to like unpack everything. And so for today, I just wanted to jump into the meat of it right away, just because you guys create so much stuff that we can't possibly cover it in one session, but we'll try our best. One of the things that I've absolutely loved about Drift's whole approach to content is more recently, of course, your Drift Insider platform, which is almost like a media platform that's brought to you by Drift. So for people who may not have heard of Drift Insider before, do you want to give us like just a quick overview of that, and then we can jump into some of the shows inside that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Drift Insider is like the number one learning community and platform for marketing and sales professionals. We have 40,000 members. It's been around for just about 18 months now, and in 18 months it's grown from having no members to now about 40,000, which is pretty remarkable. We have thousands and thousands of people. I think it's north of 5,000 people certified in either conversational marketing, conversational sales. We have some Drift, platform type certifications. But to your point, it's the place for all of our content. It's this destination that includes all of our podcasts, our blog now, all of our books, the research reports we have, our webinars. It even includes our knowledge base and an active community of people where they can discuss different things, Drift or not Drift related. And I like to think of episodic content in kind of two ways, Kareem. One is, entertainment based. Right? You said Netflix. Netflix is mostly entertainment based type of episodic content. Some of it, of course, is not. But then there's like educational episodic content, which I would say is a little bit different and maybe a little bit more kind of like Masterclass. If people are familiar with masterclass.com, and it's like the educational aspect of content from I'm going to learn something in service of this outcome I'm trying to get to, or this growth I'm trying to achieve. So I think it's interesting when you talk about episodic content, they can be, of course, be blended, and they, of course, should probably both educational or entertainment based be inspirational in nature. But I do think there are two distinct ways you can approach your episodic content if you think about it in those two categories.
100%. And I mean, again, like there's so many shows that come to mind that you guys have put together. I love the fact that you highlighted at the start that Drift Insider has 40,000 members. How do you guys differentiate between, the members of Drift Insider versus, let's say, anybody else that is part of, let's say, your larger community?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're trying to get more and more people who learn about drift or are already engaged in the drift community to become members. Like that's going to be one of our primary objectives in 2021. We want
Right.
everyone who finds the brand, finds a piece of content for the first time to go down a path to saying, wow, there's so much value for me to become a member of Drift Insider that it's a no-brainer. So we're working through
Right.
all that. We did a big rebrand of the content experience, the community experience at the beginning of November 2020. And now
Hmm.
everything is underneath this insider brand. And we have a lot of shows. We have these episodic shows, 5 podcast shows. We have a show called No Filter. That's a
Hmm.
video-based show that was really exclusive to only insider members. And what's interesting about that, Kareem, is we're going to use that show, No Filter, and open it up to non-members, right? So it's going to be used to help us attract more people to the Drift brand from an organic, search perspective, from a social perspective. But then what we're going to do is say, look, you just got to become a member to get access to all of the show content and even more exclusive show content. So I think the way you can
Right.
think about your episodic content is in 2 ways. One is open and accessible to anyone. But then if you start to create kind of, like you said, a media Netflix type experience to some of this content you have, you can start to put some of that behind that membership and use that kind of as a small, it might not be perfect, but a small flywheel type effect that would then
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
get someone to invite a member to joining the membership experience because they are finding so much value in your content. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2021. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited as well because I think I'm probably right in saying that not a lot of brands think that way, which is a testimony to the creativity and the genius I think of this idea because like especially in the, if we call it like the episodic culture, or like the binge worthy like kind of culture that we're living in right now. You're surrounded by things like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, things like that, and I feel like people are in the headspace of subscribing to something that would then give them all that value. And I love the distinction that you made earlier as well between obviously like your typical like Netflix kind of content versus something that's more like masterclass. Like both are very much uh binge worthy content, but I think one is obviously naturally more educational than the other. Like I'm personally obsessed with masterclass. I've taken a bunch of classes on that, so I definitely know the value that it brings. And so going back to the shows that you guys are creating, one of the things that I wanted to start off with was um, some of the shows that you guys are almost crafting behind around some of the personal brands within the company. So specifically your podcasts. How did you guys come up with, first of all, the notion of creating more than one show, and what was the process to almost like identify? Do you know what I mean? Like different people to sort of like be the face of each show, whether it's whether it's build or whether it's growth or any of the other ones.
Yeah, it's a great question. Number one, great content always starts with passion.
Hmm.
You will not create an amazing piece of content or a great piece of content. It might be good, but something that's really great or exceptional without having deep passion for what you're creating and the topic you're writing about, the topic you're filming about, the topic you're talking about.
Hmm.
So we really make sure that when we um, have someone start a new show, create a piece of content, it could be as simple as a blog article, or it could be like a podcast, show like you just mentioned.
Hmm.
That person is passionate about that topic. They of course have hopefully some experience in that topic,
Right.
some expertise, some wisdom, but they are deeply excited about that thing and they want to learn more. They are a curious learning machine when it comes to that thing they are creating something around. So, if you
Hmm.
look at Trisha, our CMO, who has got this great podcast and a great CMO, she calls it the CMO 3.0 newsletter. But CMO Conversations is her podcast. she is deeply passionate about creating the future of marketing and the future wave and the future community of CMOs. And what does it mean to be the future CMO or a CMO in the future? So she's bringing in all these people that might not necessarily be CMOs, but might be people that a CMO would need to work with, a CMO that needs to learn from, someone that could actually help her as a CMO understand a part of business in a different way. So she, of course, is deeply passionate about that. If you look at Matt Bellotti, you look at growth. He's deeply passionate about growth. He is, a growth marketer. He's a great product manager. He is someone who is a curious learning machine around all things helping businesses grow, helping products grow, the product journey. So he's natural at then pulling in people, exciting people with what he has to say and think about, but then being great at interviewing. Because if you're passionate, like you are about this topic, you're going to ask great questions, like the question you just asked, and you're going to then feed into that. So I think really at the end of the day, if you aren't excited about something and aren't like want to learn more about it, it doesn't matter what the content format is. It's not gonna come out as best as it could have if you were more excited and were just more passionate about it.
Right, and I love that because it's not like, a lot of people feel like, oh well, the imposter syndrome kicks in, right? And it's like, oh well, when I'm the proverbial, let's say, expert in this field, then maybe I'll think about it. But I love what you highlighted about the fact that obviously they're very knowledgeable of what they do, but it is right, like it's self-actualization. It's something that is always going to be in constant development. Rather, the most important thing is that someone's passion or someone's interest in something shines through. So and that's definitely the case with these shows, and obviously the respective audience groups that you guys would be targeting with these different shows and are catering to definitely feel that on the other side. And so from these shows, you guys have a lot of shows, and I'll probably ask you at one point, like, what was your philosophy as a company to create so many shows versus, let's say, one kind of like flagship show? But shifting gears over to hashtag no filter, like, and I know you mentioned that show earlier, but a show like No Filter, how would that be different than some of the ones we were just talking about just now?
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's video based. Not all of the podcasts we do have video. I would say the
Right.
majority don't, right? It's just audio. No Filters, 100% all video and audio. And it was also started as an experiment. Elizabeth, who is the producer of No Filter, she's part of our creative team. Not someone from like a traditional content background, like many of our podcast hosts, which is good. That's like a good thing, I think, right? Because
Yeah.
Elizabeth had this deep passion for trying this thing out. And guess what happened? She worked really hard to make sure that she planned out the first season, line up guests, create a brand around it, and she was passionate and she really cared. Like she cared about the success about No Filter. Like how can we make this as successful as possible, and how can we make No Filter resonate with our audience, which is the other thing we should talk about, which is like, what's the purpose of you creating an episodic type show? You need to have the passion, but then what's the purpose? And it always starts with your audience. So what are you trying to do with this audience? Are you trying to introduce them to your brand? Are you trying to activate them a little bit more and pull them into your brand deeper? Are you trying to talk a little bit more about the category that you actually play in, or the category that you created and are the leader in? There's many different kind of flavors to what a show could be. Typically, most shows are more like brand, top of the funnel, maybe middle of the funnel. There's not very many middle to bottom of the funnel type of shows out there, which I think is a huge opportunity. There's more on YouTube, maybe. There's definitely some YouTube folks that are doing some interesting things from a middle to bottom of the funnel from a brand standpoint. But a lot of those things on YouTube, Kareem, they're not actually coming from the brand itself. It's someone who's like, has a vested interest in the brand. You could say like George Thomas, who, on I think Sprocket Talk, or something like that. I forget. I think that's the name of it. Do you remember the name of that show?
Um,
Sprocket Talk.
I can't recall for sure, but I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a HubSpot partner. You know, he's been a long time HubSpot partner. He's created a whole
Yeah, yeah,
show
yeah.
around HubSpot. It's YouTube
Uh-huh.
based, it's video based, but like it's all about HubSpot and from like a tool platform standpoint. But like
Sure.
we could do that here at Drift. There's nothing stopping us. I think that's another whole evolution to episodic content. Episodic content that's a little bit less brand heavy and more educational focus at bomb the funnel. So going back to no
Mhm.
filter, like Elizabeth, said, look, I'm going to try this thing out. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to figure out over time how to get more out of this content. One thing we're doing a lot now, Kareem, is like figuring out how to take our audio podcasts that are mostly just audio and no filter and repurpose them, repackage them, reposition them. So we actually
Mhm.
created the CMO Secrets book that's part of Drift Insider. Just go to Drift Insider, drift.com/insider. And that CMO Secrets book came from all of the CMO interviews that David, our CEO, and DG, former VP of marketing,
Mhm.
did in the first few seasons of Seeking Wisdom, our
Wow.
flagship podcast.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we just took all that audio and we put that into an awesome CMO Secrets book. That is something I think you have to do with these episodic shows. I know Chris Savage at Wistia believes in this. I know a lot of people believe in this, but it's making it a discipline as you think about your integrated campaigns for the next quarter and the quarter after that.
Mm.
Let's not always have to create something new. Let's reuse that messaging, reuse that great storytelling and content in a different format for a similar or the same audience.
Yeah, I love that so much, and it's something that I think you guys are known to do like time and time again. Specifically with even like creating books based off of content that was already created before. And to your point, Mark, like with episodic content, like that's one of the types of content that is most ripe for doing this sort of thing. With beyond just creating more snippets on, let's say, social from the original episodes, but actually thinking beyond that and thinking how you could actually mine these episodes for even more content in ways that maybe people have not necessarily thought of before, which which is definitely great. And I suppose in terms of the speaking of which, like in terms of uh, one of the things that I've always loved as one of the people in your audience for like years now. Like I follow you obviously, like personally on LinkedIn, and I follow the content that you put out, and I also follow like Drift obviously. But one of the things that I've absolutely loved with the videos that you've been putting out is the ease with which you were creating all of these like conversational marketing like 101 videos back in the day. I wonder, like, what's your philosophy to like production? Should companies overthink producing episodic content, or do you have a different take on it overall?
No, I mean it starts small. So there's a couple things. One is
Yeah.
if you get really good at reusing and repackaging, repositioning, refreshing, it's like my four content R's.
Hmm.
uh,
Nice.
you can make your company, you can make your marketing team number one and like your content folks, but like your company overall look very much bigger than it is,
Mm.
because you're like,
Nice.
oh, I always have to create something new, like I have to hire more people, I have to do these things. Like Drift doesn't have a very large content team. Can you guess how many people full time at Drift are working on content? Like, what's your guess?
Oh man, can I say 10 maybe?
Yeah, it's half that. It's five.
Oh wow.
Yeah, five. I mean, there's other things we do, right? We have some great partners that are
Mhm.
not part of the core Drift content team helping us, but it's five. And people are like, well, how is that even possible? It's because of what I just said, right? You have to
Right.
think about how to repurpose all this stuff. So it goes back
Yeah.
to your question about how to get started. You don't have to have this amazing $5,000 camera, a set of lenses, Kino lights, which are like movie studio grade lights. You don't have to have boom mics and sliders and all this other stuff. We're starting to build all that out of Drift. We had all that at HubSpot, but we didn't start with
Mhm.
that. We started simple. There was one DSLR maybe, and it was one lens, it was one camera, it was a lapel mic, it was simple. Now you can just do it with your iPhone. Like, where you and I both are using our iPhones, these cameras are fantastic. You don't need anything more than that. Just start simple. Get a ring light, one of those LED ring lights. I have two of them.
Mhm.
Get maybe a gimbal. right? DJI, it's a great company.
Yep.
Get like a stand, a good microphone, a Yeti mic, and off you go. And I know tons of people have talked about that, but it's just a matter of actually sitting down to record something. And then actually, I think what's most important, where I would invest more money, is maybe the post production. The
Hmm.
most important stuff is like pre-production and planning, and then post-production. Like the equipment is cheap. That stuff you can do in no time at all. But I don't think enough people think about and learn about the pre and post-production, which can really make an episodic show or a piece of content really elevate it to the next.
Totally. 100%. And I mean, ultimately, like one, specifically for like your, for like a B2B audience, ultimately they care about the content and the conversations behind that content, as opposed to, you know what I mean, like them expecting like a Hollywood production per se. Of course, it's it's great if this is something that a company could do in house. And I love how you mentioned that, with HubSpot, it kind of started small and then obviously grew from there. Drift, it's pretty much the same idea, but the focus was always on the content of the content, if that makes sense. And I suppose from a post production perspective, once that's done and dusted, one of the things that we talked about in the book that we did together is your passion and keenness on really thinking of the entire company as an extension of the marketing team, and not being selfish with content that, content that belongs to marketing. So I know you'll probably go on a rant on this, but yeah, let's hear it.
Oh yeah, I mean, uh, the entire company is a representation of the brand and experience it's creating for people.
Mhm.
Um, the marketing team should enable other people across the organization to participate in creating something, right? So like we have many people, we've talked about a few of them, that are doing amazing things with podcasts as hosts of shows. Everyone from our sales team to our product team to the marketing team, to David Cancel, our CEO. Elias has a show now too called The American Dream. He's starting to do things with content. It's awesome. But like you have to give them the outlet to help you create something. I just wrote a book called The Conversational Sales Formula. I would say 12 to 15 people shared wisdom and expertise and experience to make that book, I think, pretty good. I think it's a pretty good book
Mm.
so far. And that's what a great content marketer, content producer does. They work with people that are experts in this topic, in this discipline, the people that have the passion, the people that have the 10,000 hours type of backgrounds, right? Like that's kind
Right,
of what they
right.
say when you reach mastery, 10,000 hours. Like you want to learn from people that have done it, that can teach you what to watch out for, what to look for, and can inspire you. So that's not going to be possible by just hiring as many content marketers as possible. Content marketers are great at writing, editing, planning, producing, managing the project, distributing it, working with demand gen, working with customer marketing to make sure that it's impacting revenue. It's getting the right audiences, understanding how it fits into the product marketing messaging. That's content marketing.
Mhm.
You need to tap into everyone in your company and your community, I would say, and then you need to help them share the things they create, the things you create. Like you
Mhm.
cannot just create things and just hope things happen. Like it doesn't work like
Right,
that
right.
anymore, right? Because saturation is insane. Saturation of content is insane. It's never gonna not go down. Probably. I mean, there's a chance. I don't want
Sure,
to
it's only
speak in
going up, yeah.
yeah, I don't want to speak in absolutes. It's only going to probably go up. It might go down, but you never know. But like you got to leverage your whole organization as an extension of your marketing team. So we use something called Bamboo, Bambu, Bamboo from Sprout Social, to help people become social ambassadors. Within Drift. There's a lot of things you can do. It's just a matter of like kind of ingraining into your culture and
Mhm.
making it known that everyone at this company shapes the brand and impacts the customer experience. You can't forget
Mhm.
that, and make sure people understand what role they play in that.
100%. And I'm gonna ask you a tricky question on the back of that, but I totally understand the the dynamic of, okay, like when people co-create the content together, naturally they are incentivized to share that content on. For some companies, as you might imagine, right? Like not everyone can, if it's 100, if it's, let's say, 100 people, not every single person could obviously get involved in the content. But what are some things that maybe you guys have realized in terms of getting people to just be motivated to share that content on? Because we all know that, let's say company page like profiles and things like that are obviously a great and a primary outlet to the content, but we all know that like personal brands have similar, if not in some cases even like collectively more impact than your standard kind of like company shares. So how do we motivate and tap into folks who may not necessarily have had like a direct participation in the content to actually share that on, and maybe use it as a way to build their own personal brand in that sense?
Yeah, it's about just like taking the time to build a relationship with different people in the company. Like this
Mm,
is there is no like big secrets there. I just take a very deliberate approach to talking to a lot of people. Like, so when you look at my calendar, people will say, Mark, I don't know how you do it. Like, you have 8, 9 like, meetings a day, 10 meetings. You're talking to people all the time. You're on sales calls. You're doing all these things. Like, how does it all work? I'm like, almost all of those meetings are productive. We're either creating something, we're exploring something, I'm teaching something, I'm learning something. It's not just a meeting. If I'm just sitting there listening to something, I'm not going to attend that meeting most likely, unless it's an executive meeting. Like even those, like we record and we have video and we can listen and then there's dialogue back and forth. Like, and this is kind of culturally in terms of how Drift operates. This is something that DC and Elias really, really are I would say obsessed about in some ways.
mm,
Don't waste time. So like my time is most valuable by introducing people to the content, getting them to a level of trust with me or someone on my team to help us create a piece of content. It's just
mhm,
about building relationships and having conversations with people, and that just takes effort and time. You can't live in this content bubble. I hate this, a content bubble. It sucks,
mhm,
and it's like people got to get out of it. And I think you got to use your creative intelligence, a term that I'm going to be writing a lot more about. There's
yep,
emotional intelligence, EQ, there's IQ, of course, but like creative intelligence, CQ, is something I think
mhm,
we need as content marketers, we as just anyone who's in any type of profession that's somewhat creative. I would argue sales is a creative profession, needs
mhm,
to get better at in terms of thinking through how do I leverage a relationship, and leverage is a strong word, but how do I build a relationship where both participants in that relationship, both people get some value from it. And from a
mhm.
content standpoint, it's about helping me get my our content out to an audience, helping get that content to the right people, or it's helping us create the content.
Right. And just on the back of that, Mark, do you look internally, or do you look at? I mean, naturally, you'd look at internal and external, but what are some tips that you can share with our audience around, finding those collaborators to begin with, in that sense?
Yeah, the tips to find people. It's both internal and external. Um, it's really about just asking, like, hey,
Hmm.
I'd love to connect with you. Your background is super interesting. It's kind of feeding into people's egos. Like, unless that's one way, right? Egos is one way. Unless get an introduction from someone, that's another way. The
Hmm.
introduction is great. Um, it's really about listening to the things you have at your disposal around what other people are talking about and saying and how they're reacting to things, and saying, man, that person is super passionate or super wise about this thing. I'm going to give them a big pat on the back for that, and I'm going to try to connect with them. And like, I'm
Hmm.
again, my agenda like long term is to hopefully connect with them and do this thing in partnership with them, but I'm going to try to like just help them or add some value or learn from them in the beginning, and like take some time to develop it. Like, don't try to go in with a strong ask. That is the wrong way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, pick your favorite guru, but I mean, Gary Vee, for example, would say, jab, 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 right hook. The jab being the value add, and the right hook would, be the ask, let's say, and that only comes after a considerable period of time after that relationship has been built. And naturally, if we reach out to people under the context of, hey, the reason why I'm reaching out to you is because you have experience in so and so, naturally they're more inclined, of course, to help, and of course just start off that relationship. And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we're currently experimenting with at Tribe Tactics is doing partnerships on a company level as well. So not just with thought leaders, but rather on a company level, so that both marketing teams are fully engaged and are fully aligned on building something cool together. And hopefully we'll have some cool announcements to make on the back of that. But we just realized, like, hey, company A and company B are talking to the same audience. They're trying to help the same audience with different content, different angles, different products and services. How do we actually put our heads together and come up with something cool? So yeah, I suppose it's definitely something that has benefits to do on a company to company level, or even a company to individual level. And ultimately it is always like individual to individual, like it's all about building relationships, like you said. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of last but not least, in terms of like just given the sheer volume of content that you guys have been creating, specifically with episodic content, are there any parting thoughts that you had around, you know, anyone who's looking to do this for the first time? Do you have any advice at all that you could share with our audience?
Don't overthink it, right? Number one, do not overthink this, but start with passion. What's the purpose of it? Who's passionate about this? Start with the audience, right? So it's like the purpose and the audience, which is, purpose is also like what metric or goal do we have around this?
Hmm.
And I would set, like 3 months out, then, the next 3 months. Don't think about like, oh, we have this big annual thing we're trying to do with this thing. Like, no, like create quick learning loops when you're doing
Yeah.
episodic content. Episodic content can be like 4 episodes, one a week or one every 2 weeks. That's a season, right? It could be like that. It could be that small, I think. It could be six, it could be eight, it could be 10. But start
Yeah.
small, iterate, learn, feedback loops, and talk to the people that are consuming your episodic content. Talk to the listeners, talk to the people that are liking it, that aren't liking it, and get all these different perspectives, and then make your own judgments on how to change things and improve them. But you got to listen to your audience as well.
100%. And in closing, Mark, I know we could be here all day long talking about episodic content and all the cool things that you guys are working on in that regard. But I am conscious of your time, so maybe in closing, can you tell us where people can find Drift Insider and all the content that you guys are creating at the moment?
If you just go to Google, your favorite search engine, just type in Drift Insider, you'll find it number one result, or just drift.com/insider. It's free. It's open to everyone, so it's a free open membership. Love your feedback on it. If you're already an Insider member, big thank you. Thank you so much for all the support. If you're a Drift customer, thank you for the support. We appreciate everything you folks do. You are definitely pioneers in this revenue acceleration movement and category. Can't thank you enough. And if you listen to one of our podcasts that are part of the Drift Insider Network, thank you for that. Thank you for your commitment to learning and listening. And if you have feedback, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. Just Google my name, Mark Kilens, and I will 100% respond.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll make sure to add links once the episode goes out as well, so that we make it as easy as possible for people to discover the content. But Mark, as always, thank you so much for being on today, and I will catch you soon.
Kareem, thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.
See you guys.